So as you know, you've signed up for the spring product update. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Richard Saunders. I'm the Contensis product owner, and I help set the direction of Contensis alongside Sai Horan, who's also on this call today. So for a little while now, we've had site view, the ability to create a site structure and attach entries to that content. And if you've been migrating from Contensis Classic, bringing this kind of site view interface into Contensis is really enabling the connection of deployable blocks of content using blocks alongside content types and entries. But one of the sticking points has been site view permissions, the ability to manage and control who can access site view, who can create nodes, attach stuff to particular URLs. So in Contensis 15.5, we'll be introducing site view permissions. In order to do that, we've had to re-implement the Nodes API. So whilst it's an entirely new API in the background, it's the same as it is previously. So there's no changes to the existing endpoint or any changes to code that you've been making. And we've done this in order to support the permissions model and to get that done in a performant way. We've moved from one database technology to another to support this. So we've moved from Cassandra to CockroachDB to give us the kind of support that we needed. Through the re-implementation of the Nodes API, we've also introduced a path property on the API, allowing you to get the path of a particular node. We've introduced a new move endpoint, so we've created a dedicated endpoint for moving nodes in the site view tree. And along with that, we've introduced a webhook to understand when nodes have moved. We've also included a version property on a node as well now, because we've got future plans on being able to support preview and publishing of changes of the site view structure. With all that said, in the API in the background, this is fundamentally going to bring roles-based permission support for your users and your content teams. So you'll use the roles builder to define who can manage nodes and what kind of content can be attached to those nodes. And that's fundamentally going to be broken down into different types of actions. The nodes themselves, creating a URL or updating their display names that are used in menus or whether they're included in menu, and the ability to kind of delete them and change them. Then alongside that, we have permissions of what entry actions can be applied to those nodes. Can somebody detach a homepage or attach a new one or replace one? And what content types can they do that? What content types can they apply to those particular nodes? And in recent releases, we've also introduced renderers and proxies. So who can control what proxies are attached to particular URLs? And should everyone be able to change renderers or not that are associated with blocks? So lots of granularity for different supported actions on nodes themselves. To your end users, they will see a site view tree, the entire site view tree, or they can choose to change that site view tree to view a view that just represents where they have permissions to create content or update content. So with this in mind, let's go and have a demo and see it in real life and take a look. So here we are in Contensis. And if you've been using site view up until now, you will have assigned users to a site view administrators group, and they will effectively see the entire site view tree. They would see all the nodes. They'd be able to click through the nodes. They'd be able to edit properties, detach, replace entries. And this is a real sticking point for large organizations, like allowing their users to potentially remove content on their site is a bit of a big no-no. So How do we go about setting up these permissions? And as I mentioned in my slide deck, it's all based on user roles. So I've got some configured. I've got various tabs open at the top of my screen with different users logged in, so we can go and take a look at what it would look like for each of those user types. So here's roles. I'm going to start off. This is our Leaf project, our plant website. And I'm going to start off with what it would look like for a marketing team, what type of content they can create and where they can create that content. So here's the roles. If you're using roles today, you've got different entry support, so different content that your users can create. So in this scenario, I've got a blog post content type. The author can carry out all actions. In fact, I may just want them to create and save a blog post or do everything on a blog post. For this marketing team, I want them to only be able to make changes and submit changes to the homepage. I want them to create content pages and I want them to create landing pages. Now, the question is, where do I want those things to be creatable? And this is where you will add site view permissions into your role. So, for example, in the About Us section, I want users to be able to set a location of about, so the About Us section of the site. And I want them to be able to create and update nodes within that section. And then I can begin to assign the types of content within that section. So in the About section, on the node itself, so /about, and anything underneath it, I want them to be able to manage entries of the type content pages and landing pages. And this continues. So on the root node of the website, I want them to be able to manage entries of homepage and only on that root node, and blog post, the same as we've seen previously. So what's it look like now that permission is set up for a marketing team? So I've got a user associated to this role called marketing team. And if we head over to this tab, we can see that the marketing team member is logged in. And this is the site view tree. So they're currently viewing all of the site view tree nodes. And from their permissions, they can update and edit any of these pieces of content. They can also view the node properties, and they can change the display name or the slug, which is used as the URL. And they can make those changes and update them. Now, if we didn't want the marketing team to control and update those properties, we could just go to the role editor, go back to permissions. In the About node, we can say we don't want them to update anything in there. In fact, if I apply it to this one and I refresh, we've moved some of the node options that were previously on the home node to the top now to be a bit more discoverable. If I just refresh this, we'll now see that the privacy policy and any content within this site section, I can't update the display name and slugs now. So we can control even down to that kind of granularity of what they can update on the node itself. Also within here, if I'm looking at the blog node, when I go to create a new entry now, all I see is blog post. I've granted permission for the blog post entry type so they can create them, and they can only create them in the blog section. We don't see them in the About Us section. All we see in the About Us section is the content page and landing page that were defined in the role. And here in products, they can't change anything because the role hasn't got that defined. So they can view the content in read only, but they can't make any changes to it, and they can't create new nodes because the context menu options of create and attach have all been removed. So that gives lots of granularity. Now, if I was a product editor, I'm currently viewing this logged in as a product editor. And if we go back to the permissions and look at a product editor, we can see now they can create pots and plants, they can create plant types, and they can manage this content within these site sections of products and plants. So if I'm logged in as a product user now, the first thing I want to show you is the ability to view the site view structure to where I can create and manage content. So if I click on the options for site view and click on my site view, now the tree is filtered just to the product section. So navigating through the product section, I can view plants, I can see all the plants, I can update the plants because that permission, that entry permission has been set. I can change their node properties and update their names or the display names that might display in a menu or in a search result. And that's given us lots and lots of flexibility. So we really hope that this will help organizations give a lot more granular control to their site view users and manage that content. We know some users edit that content through the entry editor and they don't use site view screen. They may choose that they just want to edit entries. So those permissions filter through to the entry editor as well. So if I was a product editor and I clicked on spider plant, if you've used the manage location screen before in the entry editor, this would allow you to add this piece of content to multiple nodes within site view. Well, now this is restricted to permissions as well. So it's currently attached to this plant node. But if I expand this now, I don't see pots. I don't see anywhere else in the site view tree because I don't have permission to create that content anywhere else. So yeah, this has been filtered down all the way through the UI to control where people can place stuff in site view. Couple of other smaller changes. If I reset back to entire site view, you can now preview proxies within the site view tree. So you see here, we've got this proxy overlay. And when I view the node properties, oh, I don't see proxy information. Well, we can surface that because this user doesn't have proxy permission. So what we can do, we can go to product editors. We can say they want to see proxies. So we add proxies and we want them to be able to view them. So we'll save that change, head back over to our editors, give it a refresh to refresh their permission set. And now the proxy details are presented within that node properties panel as well. All these settings in the root menu options, the viewing by menu order or alphabetically, or setting my site view or entire site view are saved in local storage. So if you're logged in back in, it will remember where you were previously. So that's site view permissions. So if we head back over to Keynote and look at what's next. So you're working on content. There are multiple people in your organization working on similar content, working on entries that are a combination of multiple people's work. And actually, what you want to be able to do is interact and collaborate on that content. So in Contensis 15.5, we're introducing commenting. And we're allowing and supporting commenting on entry fields to start with. So this will allow you to start a conversation on any entry field in the entry editor. A field can have multiple conversations. So if it's a piece of sort of composer editor or some long form content, currently you could start multiple conversations about different aspects of that field's content. So if different people need to be involved in different conversations, multiple conversations can be started. We've got support for mentioning users, so mentioning other users in Contensis, so they can be notified and flagged of those comments that have been made on content, allowing you to kind of inform people and them to kind of review that content together. You can mark conversations as resolved, or if you want to resurrect a previous historic conversation, you can unresolve those comments. And we have support for comment webhooks. So you can trigger a webhook when a comment is created or updated, when something's been resolved or unresolved or applied to. And the commenting API that's been created has been set out to be extendable. So I said it started with entry fields. We're already looking in the Canvas editor about how we would define a selection of text in a text fragment, but also the fact that this API could be applied to blocks or content types or to assets in the future, bringing commenting across the user interface and not just limited to the entry editing experience. So let's go and take a look at commenting in Contensis. So, okay, I'm going to move this bar. Got a couple of entries open, same CMS, I'm logged in as myself in this case. So I've got an aloe vera plant. When I come into this plant, you'll notice that now an entry has a new add comment button and a view comment button if there are comments being made on a particular field. And you also see in the sidebar here a conversation view. So if I click on the conversation view, it says, oh, there's a conversation on care advice. I can click on it and read that comment. I can easily add comments to an existing field. So I can say, are these all the conditions that we need? So I can start that conversation. We also support threaded conversations. So if we look at resolve conversations, so this is previous conversations that have existed. We can see that there was a conversation on the photos field. So if I click on photos, I'm directed to the tab where those comments were made, and I can see that they're resolved at the moment, but I can unresolve that comment now, and I can carry on that conversation. So here it is in this photos field, and we can kind of have threaded responses to those comments. Really kind of nice to kind of see this in Contensis for a while. I know we're going to be using this a lot in the content that we produce for contensis.com, and we hope you're going to love that too. So that's an overview of commenting, and let me head back into Keynote. It doesn't stop there with commenting. We wanted to enable you to be able to see when those comments have been made within your entries. Now, I'll touch on later on, we want to support notifications and email notifications, and that's going to come in the next release. But in the interim, we want to introduce a dashboard within Contensis itself. So we've started work, and we're most of the way through this work for producing a dashboard. And the plan is to probably roll this out a few weeks after the 15.5 release has been completed as a UI update. But what it's going to do, it's going to bring together two widgets at the moment. This left-hand comment widget, which will present all the comments that you have been involved with. So where you've been directly mentioned, where there's been a reply to a conversation you've started, where a conversation that you've been involved with has now been resolved. And you'll be able to click through this widget and click directly back into the entry and taken directly to that comment that you've made, and continue that conversation. So bringing visibility of these comments into the dashboard. We're also introducing just this entries view widget, which fundamentally uses the views that you can create today in the entries listing screen. And you can have multiple tabs across this entry widget. The ability to maybe display content awaiting approval, content that I need to translate, content that I've updated in the last 30 days, and present that in this widget as well. So this is the way we're going to surface those comments in the first instance, and later on introduce the email notifications. So yeah, I've touched on comment activity and the entry widget. So outside of site view and commenting, we're currently working through a process of removing functionality that exists in a SaaS dashboard. So we've seen reverse proxies brought in the last release. And in this release, we're bringing redirects into play as well. So the ability to create permanent or temporary redirects within the Contensis interface, all based on user roles in a familiar interface. So you'll be able to assign who can create, update, and manage those redirects, and easily search and filter those redirects in the Contensis UI. So let's take a look at the redirect screen. I'll just show you the permissions on here. I'm in product editors at the moment, but we look at redirects. So you now see a new redirects option within the roles builder. And from here, you can control who can create, update, delete, and view those redirects. So you might just want to give somebody visibility to the redirects that exist for a Contensis project. And you can do it this way. I'm in as a system admin, so let's take a look at the redirects. So a really simple screen, ability to search in our left-hand side, and presenting the redirects in the right-hand side. We've done a lot of work around this previously when you updated redirects in the SaaS dashboard. It could take a while for those redirects to be deployed. I think it was about 12 minutes because it used to deploy all redirects at the same time. Now we can do individual redirect updates, and they can be deployed in a few seconds now to the load balancers. You can edit existing ones, so we can edit existing ones and change its properties and the redirect type that it exists. If you've got multiple domains set up for a particular project, you'll see a list of domains in the source domains that this redirect should apply to. And you've got all the configuration options that you previously had in the SaaS dashboard. The benefit of bringing it into Contensis as well, we can support things like managed columns and present you some additional data. So understand when redirects were created and modified, who they were modified by, and when they were created. So you can search on these. So I've only got 2 in here at the moment. But if we go to about, it will filter out from the source and destination URLs. And we can use the filtering as well down to match type and status code. So yeah, a really nice addition, bringing the familiarity of the Contensis interface to control more of your site, all under one login. So that's redirects. So every Contensis release, we look to introduce improvements across the interface, and this release is not an exception to that rule. So the first thing we've done is introduced in 15.4, we started to surface different favorites across the Contensis interface. Well, we've just extended this slightly for when you create new entries. When you've got favorites set up for new entries, up in the top right hand corner, the new entry button now changes to a split button, and you can easily access your favorites from the drop down. So just quickly access plant spots, blog post, or whatever content that you create on a regular basis. So yeah, just a small enhancement, but it just takes one step out of the flow of content creation. I've already touched on proxies in site view. So proxies was released in 15.4, and we've now surfaced that proxy information within the site view tree to give visibility to it. We also continue to work on blocks, and in the background over the last couple of weeks, Alex has been working hard to add more behavior. We now surface discovery errors in the interface, and we highlight those errors for the particular version, and you can drill down to find out why there's an error of that block being discovered. And we present that information in the version detail screen. So in this case, that the Docker image exceeds the 512 megabyte limit that we've currently got set. We also have introduced the support for Contensis single sign-on for the blocks tool preview toolbar, so we can support ADFS and Azure logins. That didn't go out in the first release, and that will be supported now. We've also made a bunch of accessibility improvements, focusing on quite a couple of main components within the UI at the moment, around the chip component and around checkboxes and toggles and radio buttons for Dragon Simply Speaking support. I'll just briefly show you what I mean by those components so you're aware. If I was in the entry listing screen, for example, the chip component is this component that you'll see across the interface. So these chip lists here, when you've made a selection. Previously, to navigate between this input box and the list, you would tab into it, and then you would use the arrow keys to navigate left and right. Now, when we had this tested by the DAC, keyboard users felt that actually this wasn't expected behavior for working on the web. That's not how they work on the web. So they were expecting these to be tabbed. So there's tab support for those now, but there's also a change of behavior in the way that these are read out to screen reader users. To tab through these previously and to remove them, you would select a chip, and then you would tab again to get to the X button, and then you press enter to remove them. Well, we've taken that overly verbose way of removing the items now and treated these as individual buttons. So a screen reader or assistive technology user will get told that it's a remove review button. And so pressing on the button would remove review from the list. So just pressing enter now just removes those. And so they've been updated across the whole UI. So if you've used the tag picker within an entry, it'll apply there. And every time there's one of these filtered drop downs. The other work we've done is around checkbox lists, radio button lists, where previously the way we'd coded these checkbox and radio buttons and toggle buttons gave them an implicit label. So basically where you wrap a label element around the checkbox or the radio button, and largely across assistive technology that's supported. That's like, okay, I know what this thing is. When Dragon users come to use checkbox and toggles and radio buttons, they don't get read the label, so they wouldn't know that it was published, unpublished, or archived in this instance. They would just know that there was 3 checkboxes. So we've now explicitly labeled these, and that applies to everywhere across the UI again. And so we shouldn't see that problem occurring anymore, because we put some automation in to prevent that happening again. So yeah, some small improvements from an accessibility perspective, but making it more available to all users. So that brings us to the end of the updates on the Contensis 15.5 release. But I want to give you a little bit of a flavor of what's coming. So our CXM team has been working on Zapier integration. And this is something myself and a colleague worked on during one of our lockdown projects 2 years ago, where we started the work to create this integration between Contensis and Zapier. And Neil in CXM and Rob have been working hard on bringing this to a place now where Zapier is in public beta. And so if you've got the Zapier account or you want to kind of give it a try, you can actually use a Zapier Zap that you've created. So what does that look like? Well, it might look like something that when you create content in Contensis, you want it to add it to a row in Google Sheets. So I'll just show you what this might look like. So I've got this Zap and I've got this Contensis trigger. And I've said in this trigger that I want to use Contensis as the application. Every time an entry is updated, I want to do something with it. Then it asks you for some account information, and I've just set up an API key within Contensis. And if you were to look at what one of these connections looks like, I have to recreate a fresh one to show you, so I'll leave that one for the moment. Once your connection has been made, it says what project do you want to connect to, and in this case I've chosen website, and then it's asked me what content type am I interested in, and then it can do a test. So it uses those credentials, looks up those entries, and returns all the entry information. So from here now, we can pass this content to another system. In this case, create a spreadsheet row in Google Sheets. So again, we've got different types of actions. You could say copy a worksheet, create a worksheet. It'll support updating a Google Sheet as well. That just needs a little bit more configuration. So I've just done this simple setup. So if I update a plant in Contensis now, I've got this document here. So I've got this Google Sheet called leaf plants. If I update this spider plant, I don't know, maybe I'll just remove this full stop as a very simple example and hit save. What that actually does now is the Zapier integration uses webhooks. It automatically creates a webhook for us, fires off that webhook event to the fact that a entry has been updated. When we go into Google Sheets now, we can see that we've presented some of that entry information in the Google spreadsheet. And again, all of that configuration can be seen here. You can see here I've got the ID field. I want it to use the sys ID from the entry, and these are all the fields in the entry that are coming back that we can display in Google Sheets. And I can continue to add something. So if I wanted to add another field, I'd go into the Google Sheet, say, I don't know, have I got Latin name? Yeah, I've got Latin name. Let's just put another title. I can come back to Zapier and refresh the fields now. It's seen that I've just added a title field, and I can map new data to this field. So maybe I want to put, tell you what, let's do, is it published? I can change that title afterwards. And I can publish that change to that Zap. So next time I update a plant, it'll be added as a row. So let's go. Okay. So that Zap is published. If I update a different plant, for example, save this one. And I go to Zapier now, we can see that that plant has been updated in Google Sheets, and it's called title at the moment because I couldn't remember which field to use, but it's put it as true. So this is the published field. Ideally, you go back into Zapier now to make sure that the fields are refreshed so it knows that it's the publish field, not the title field now. So that's just a really simple integration. Now, Zapier supports thousands and thousands of different applications, and you just create these simple zaps and you say, what's the trigger? So you could start with Google Sheets or something else, or you could start with something like MailChimp and say, when, I don't know, an email is opened, like, I don't know, add an entry to Contensis. When a new customer comes in to MailChimp, add them as a person inside Contensis as an entry. So this is going to open up loads of different opportunities for people to create simple integrations just using a sort of a simple interface. So that's Zapier. So that's coming. We need to get it to a place where we can become an official partner with Zapier. So we're in that process at the moment. And once we are, we'll start surfacing zaps within Contensis itself as well. So you'll be able to go to settings for a project and see create these zaps directly within an integration stream within Contensis, but you can start using it today. We're also heavily working on the Canvas editors. We've previously talked about. The Content API team are coming to the end of being able to support saving of this Canvas data now as entries, and all the work around the UI and getting this content in and out of Contensis is all underway and in a really good place. So we'll see Canvas editor in the next release. Our desire this year is to make sure we address all the basic expectations that you've seen from Classic over the years, brought into Contensis this year. So email notifications will come in the next release, and that will bring with it sort of workflow notifications and commenting notifications and such. And on the same theme as bringing reverse proxies in and redirects into the interface, we're going to support the ability to add domains and your own SSL certificates within Contensis, again using roles and permissions to define who can do that work. So that's the update for today.